Good morning, everyone. It's Basse Ben Buckner back on Thursday, the 18th of September. We've got grain markets this morning that are somewhat mixed, a little weakness in corn and soybeans, a little strength in wheat. Again, volume is restricted as we have a lack of fresh news. We do have export sales this morning. We're hoping that President Trump and President Xi of China speak tomorrow morning, but I'm rather pessimistic, if you will, in that if any deal will be made in terms of including soybeans. When you think about it, the 20% tariff that Trump has on for fentanyl produces $90 billion or nearly that every year for the United States Treasury. When you look at soybeans, even if China bought the same as they did last year at 22.5 million metric tons, that would be $9 billion. So the trade-offs here are to keep the fentanyl tariffs in place. Unfortunately, China will then abstain from buying U.S. soybeans until there's a broader deal concluded, maybe late October, November, if the two meet face to face. Ben, I'll turn it over to you. Give us a rundown on export sales for the week this morning and maybe some of your thoughts longer term.
Sure, yeah. I think volume has been kind of a story this week. It's been pretty pathetic. So I don't know if that's complacency or we're just looking for something. And like we talked about yesterday, it's hard to prove or disprove. China does come back to the soybean market. We're pessimistic, but does linger in the background. Otherwise, we're going to sink our teeth into the weekly U.S. export sales. And for corn, they were fine. I think we'd like to see this, closer to 60 or 80 million bushels per week. But sales in the week ending September 11th, 48 million bushels. It's up from 21 million the previous week and up from 33 million the same week a year ago. So we're showing these to try to get a gauge on actual demand for new crop U.S. corn. I think this fits into pace analysis. So, if we see similar numbers next week and the week after, we'll all debate final exports, of course, world FOB price relationships, but the USDA probably doesn't change its number if you see sales close to 50 million bushels for the rest of September and into early October. Total commitments, the second highest on record for corn, 911 million bushels. That is up quite a bit from last year and at the upper end of the historical range. Not a lot of correlation, though. Looking at 2021 commitments the same week, then were 961 million. Final exports were 2.5 billion. So a lot's going to hinge upon final Ukrainian crop size and what South America produces next spring. Does the U.S. continue to sell corn next summer, or do sales drop to zero? I think that's going to be the big deal there. Wheat also fine, fits within the USDA's annual forecast, but sales of 14 million bushels last week have cooled from July, early August. And I think that is all part and parcel of the change in world cash wheat price relationships. The U.S. is flirting with competitive offers this week, but still a lot of competition. And in Russia, the Baltic wheat supply is the world's cheapest today. So I think most new demand that probably is forthcoming does go to those markets. So I suspect U.S. wheat export sales will be pretty ho-hum for the next couple of months. Soybean, disappointing, concerning. I think we are concerned in the market, especially given, forward prices, that there's some kind of day of reckoning. If we don't get China to sign something, we don't move this trade progress of the negotiations along one way or another. So sales last week, soybeans, 34 million bushels. It's up from 20 million the previous week, but compares to 64 million the same week a year ago. We're only selling soybeans to Egypt, Mexico, Europe. Total commitments, you see here, 378 million bushels. That's down 35% from last year. And now we're below 2019, the last iteration of trade wars between the U.S. and China. So pace analysis does get pretty alarming. There are some scenarios that it gets very bad. I will just say that it does support pretty strongly, unless there is a deal, final soybean exports below 1.5 or even below 1.4 billion bushels. And so that's the big change in the balance sheet for soybeans. So we've got to see China step up. A year ago, as of this week, the second week of the crop year, China had purchased about 214 million bushels of soybeans from the U.S. And so this week, of course, it's zero. That number expands pretty considerably as you start to compare this year to last year, Chinese buying of U.S. soybeans. So again, it's something that's alarming to us. We understand that there are a lot of meetings coming up. But if we don't get something done, we are concerned that demand risk premium is shed pretty quickly. And here's where we are today. This is all politics for the most part. So These are FOB prices, offers of soybeans from U.S. and South America. Let's take a look at this, what China sees. So today, U.S. $407 a ton, Brazilian $455 a ton. U.S. is cheaper. But if you add this tariff that China has placed on U.S. soybeans, all of a sudden, the price of soybeans when you buy them from the U.S. into China, it's $500 per ton. So we've kind of hit into this before, Dan. I think you have. It's economics at this point, unless there is a negotiation that eliminates this tariff that China has on U.S. soybeans. So it's kind of hard to say that until that happens, China does come back for the market, and we can kind of see them buying Brazilian soybeans for mid-autumn delivery, squeezing all that they can out of places like Uruguay, Paraguay as well. And also Brazilian weather. It looks pretty consistent. I'd say this is a very wet pattern in Argentina. Drought's already ended, surplus soil moisture. They get started planting their first corn crop probably in the next 2 weeks. Plant a lot of soybeans, October, November. Won't be any soil moisture issues, we can say that. I know it's a long growing season, but this does look better, the early part of the crop here compared to recent years. The Brazilian pattern looks good, but also very normal. I mean, it's the monsoon does appear to be kicking in. The major forecasting models have been very, very consistent. And about September 20th, 21st, we're going to see it start to rain in Mato Grosso. Only a few places are left arid in the next 10 days. You're seeing the Europeans precip accumulation forecast, 10-day on the left. Then you've got the evolution of rainfall in Mato Grosso and kind of the rest of the tropical latitudes of Brazil. So you can see it's rigidly seasonal. A year ago, it did not start raining until about October 12th or 13th. And so you can't plant soybeans until you have some amount of water in the fields. Planting progress, Mato Grosso specifically, very delayed, 3 or 4 weeks in some places. I don't think that happens this year. It's pretty rare for the monsoon to start in late September and then sputter thereafter. So once it kicks in, it usually kicks in for good for the next 4 or 5 months. So I think we're going to see, when they start to get published, pretty normal crop progress in central and northern Brazil. The reason that we're saying this is I know the yield debate in the U.S. will rage on, and no one can disprove today that final U.S. corn yield won't be 182, 183, 184. We understand that. I think our rebuttal here is, we want to provide some context. This is a piece of the puzzle. U.S. share of world trades dropped pretty considerably because of the expansion in South America, yield improvement in the Black Sea. So we want to put it all together. And is that picture changing because you drop corn yield 3 or 4 bushels an acre from USDA's forecast? And I think you need something else. You need some other kind of supply dislocation that would come from South America, maybe. So that's why we're kind of talking about looking at the future, looking at demand, Southern Hemisphere weather, U.S. yield, uncertain, but again, just a small part of the overall puzzle of price discovery.
Yeah, good rundown, Ben. I'm also hearing in the background that China is telling people that they have no interest in buying any more corn this year than last year. That'd be 3 million tons. USDA has them 7 in the grids, and most in the Chinese believe that their soybean imports will be under 100 million metric tons. So a slower China appears to be in the forefront here. Thank you, everybody, for listening today. We'll be back tomorrow to end the week, and have a good trading day here on Monday. Be well. Ben and Dan now signing off.